Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. For years we have heard about the effects of delayed maintenance on public schools. During the last election, both Democratic and Republican candidates cited over and over again the finding that Ohio was 50th, dead last in the condition of its school buildings. After more than a year and a half of study, 2 weeks ago the Cincinnati Public Schools released a plan to bring the buildings serving the 48,000 pupils in the district up to standard. The report is filled with technical and financial data, and we'll get into that. But before we plunge into the abstractions, let's take a look at one of the schools slated for replacement. I joined Superintendent Stephen Adamowski last week as he examined Fairview School to see what the students and teachers live with every day of the year. Fairview School in Clifton Heights, which now serves as the German bilingual school, is one of the most imposing structures on the hilltops ringing the city. But this weighty pile opened during the city's centennial 110 years ago in 1888. Not only have several major theories of education come and gone, but the building's accumulated physical shortcomings are obvious everywhere.
You see these dark brown painted doors. None of those are fire-rated doors. That any fire that would occur in a hallway or going up a stairwell, obviously you can't evacuate students from a second floor down the stairwells or into the hallway. So the concept is that you have to have a fire-rated door and jamb so that students can be protected in a classroom until they're rescued by the fire department out the windows. Now that takes time, and that's why current construction codes call for a 2-hour fire-rated door on every classroom. Now these doors that you're looking at here have no fire rating whatsoever. They're like kindling wood.
Talk to any teacher in one of the really old buildings, and you will get stories of windows that won't open in the heat of September and May and leak cold air all winter. Making a building constructed when the electric light bulb was a curiosity, work in the information age, takes lots of exposed conduit and miles of extension cords. And although it's hard to believe 10-year-olds in 1888 had to go to the bathroom less often than their counterparts in 1998, this school, which has 3 floors of classrooms, has just 1 girls' and 1 boys' bathroom in the basement. Let me tell you, if our cameras could pick up smells, those last shots would have conveyed another whole dimension of Fairview's daily challenge. Before we plunge ahead, let me give a very basic overview of the plan. Currently, the system has 72 buildings used for elementary education. The Facilities Master Plan Advisory Committee recommends that 7 of those be permanently closed and abandoned. Those include some of the oldest buildings in the district, such as Rothenburg and Linwood. 12 other buildings will be torn down and replaced, basically in the same neighborhoods. That category includes Fairview, Washburn, North Fairmount. 52 others are recommended for renovation. Finally, the plan calls for building 5 new buildings. In the end, I think, if my math is correct, that leaves the district with 69 elementary buildings. The cost to implement the proposals of the Facilities Master Plan are estimated at $459 million for the 69 elementary schools, $98 million for 9 high schools, and $140 million for project costs like architectural fees, permits, land acquisition, demolition, etc. That adds up to a grand total of $697 million. To discuss this plan, I am joined this morning by 3 guests. Della is the Vice President of Steed, Hammond, Paul, the architectural consulting firm that provided the professional support to the advisory committee. Then Judy Spraul Schmidt, who is a historian at University of Cincinnati, and also the parent of 2 students who used to be in the district but have graduated. And finally, Stuckey, who's a member of the Facilities Advisory Committee as a parent, and as I understand, has 2 children in the system today. Is that right?
That's right.
Welcome to Newsmakers. And as you all know, and I want to make everybody else aware, there's really a 4th guest here, and that's Superintendent Stephen Adamowski, who couldn't be here this morning, but we caught up with him, and we're going to be cutting in some sound as we go along. Judy, just to start out, who was on this committee?
This committee was a large committee, 18 people at some point, representing the community, representing virtually every neighborhood in the community, representing different business interests, community interests, people with different backgrounds, direct involvement in the schools, construction, a wide range of community people.
And Ty, how long, I said a year and a half, but I'm not really sure. How long did you really work on this?
Well, the 18 months is about the right time frame, but we met initially, I think, once a month, and then when we came down and it got the bulk of the information from Steed, Hammond, Paul, sometimes that was as often as every 2 weeks, and some short sessions, basically from 4 to 6, and some longer ones from 4 to 8.
So a lot of meetings.
Yes.
Well, right now there are some public meetings going on. And in those public meetings that have already taken place this week, many of the speakers have complained about what they have perceived as a secretive, non-inclusive process. To get at that process, I would like you to hear one of the representative comments, followed by a response from Dr. Adamowski.
And I'm very active in my community. How do you hear about a committee that's going to change our way of life based on our educational system when somebody just walks up and gives you a flyer? There's no input. And I would hope that the Cincinnati Public Schools Board of Education does not move out in terms of them being the authority. No one knows anything but them. I would invite you to help get community folks involved in your planning.
I think we're talking about public input on 3 stages here. First of all, we had an excellent facilities advisory committee comprised of parents, business people, citizens from all over our community that came together and worked for 18 months to put the plan together. They had excellent technical support from Steed, Hammond, Paul, the architectural firm that assisted them in the ratings of the buildings. Secondly, in those cases where we knew there were adverse recommendations, where a school would close or where something would be changed that would be anticipated to be different than our current organizational pattern, they went out and held about 12 meetings in those areas with school leadership, principal, LSDMC, leadership, PTO, and so on, to explore alternatives and to look at those recommendations. Now we're in the 3rd phase. These recommendations have been presented to the board. The board itself is going out through 3 public hearings, and we'll be listening to the public. And I fully anticipate that there's going to be refinements, adjustments in the plan that the board will make based upon the input that they receive from the public. Throughout all of that, we're going to be focusing on small issues. There are going to be nitpicking issues that are specific to each school, to each community. As we do that, it's extremely important for us not to lose sight of the big picture here. And the big picture is that the majority of our school buildings are in terrible shape. They're unsafe, they're crumbling, they're falling apart. In many cases, they're beyond maintenance. These are buildings that have to be replaced or remodeled. And we have to keep that big picture in mind, that we not immobilize ourselves through discussions on every little issue. The big picture out there is we've got to fix our schools.
Okay, this whole question of inclusiveness, after those 18 months, Ty, are you satisfied that it was an inclusive process, and are you willing as a committee member to be out there in the community selling the recommendations?
I really feel satisfied as far as the community participation by being on the advisory committee, and also I'm very willing to step out into the public to give information on how we came to some of the decisions, but also to remind the community that we're looking at the students first and trying to implement a program for buildings so that they will have a safe place to be educated in, but also as we go with the program changes and things that are involved in making the students better, that's the basis for the whole thing. And
when you say students first, you're not just meaning we always should be thinking of students first, but you're talking about the students first educational plan.
That is correct.
And Lauren, one of the things about this is that in order to create the recommendations here, you took that new educational plan that the school system has come to, students first, and you tried to create what the model school was, the ideal school. I find this fascinating. Tell me a little bit about that. Why did you do that, and what's in that model?
Well, as we've discussed, the district has developed the Students First strategic plan, which is a different approach to delivering education than what they have typically done in the past. And so in order to do that, we needed to create the appropriate educational environment in order to successfully deliver the educational programs that they have developed. Well, our approach to doing that was another aspect of the community input process. What we did was involve the community in identifying what we call community values, and we take that information and translate it into program or design concepts. We used an extensive process of focus groups and surveys, and actually talked with over 6,000 people through the course of that process to identify 95 community values.
So now wait a minute. I want to be clear about this because there is this question about inclusiveness. 6,000 people were talked to. These include parents, people who don't have kids in school right now?
Absolutely. What we do is we look at all the different constituency groups that are represented within a school district.
Okay.
You have parents, you have teachers, you have people within the community that pay for your facilities that don't necessarily have children in the schools. You have students, community and business leaders, as well as administration. And we did focus groups, surveys, in-depth interviews. We gave people the opportunity to fax in their comments, email, and things like that.
Let's get down to some specifics. What is the ideal school in this system?
Well, the ideal school facility model in this system is built around the concept that there will be team-based teaching within the K-8 plan. And the K-8 plan has divided the grades into K-3, 4, 6, and 7, 8. And so each grouping of grades has a team-based cluster of classrooms which surround what we call an extended learning area. The extended learning area is very specifically designed to create kind of a multiple use space that allows teachers to bring their classrooms together and teach in a team-based environment, more than one classroom. It allows small groups of kids to come out and work independently. It allows other people, such as parents, to come in and work with small groups of children. It's a flexible use space. One of the things that's most important about the model is flexibility and the idea that your spaces can be used in a variety of different ways.
Some real details here. Part of your ideal model school is size. What's the ideal size for? Now we're talking elementary now. Let's remind everybody of that. What's the ideal size in the recommendations from the committee?
Well, the strategic plan calls for a K-8 building, 9 grades. The ideal size is 630 students. 630 students over 9 grades, so roughly 70 children per grade. And that allows us to get the configuration we need at each team level in order to provide the appropriate team environment and the appropriate resources and core facilities that need to support that building. Obviously, you have to have recreation, media space, administrative space, resource space, full integration of technology, et cetera.
Judy, obviously that must have posed some problems when you looked at some really older, but also some moderate age buildings to get this model worked in. And you had some tough decisions?
Well, we did, but what the Steed, Hammond, Paul team did was to look at every building and look at each building and see how it could be adapted. And it was surprising sometimes to see what buildings could be easily adapted to meet the constraints of this flexible model. And it is flexible enough that you need these spaces, but they don't have to be in exactly the same configuration.
Okay. I want to move on here to another issue. Now, I've heard many people say they know the schools need help, but $697 million just seems overwhelming. To begin that discussion, I asked Stephen Adamowski whether that was a good number.
It's an absolutely responsible number. If you look at the cost of our 2 stadiums, you could do all of this for the cost of our 2 stadiums. If you look at the fact that this represents years and years of deferral on our buildings, it's an absolutely realistic number. We are in this place now because we have not acted previously. These costs will escalate every year that we delay action. The best thing we can do right now is to move ahead with at least part of the plan in terms of phases.
You know, Ty, that is a big number. And as you, as a committee member, have heard people talk about that, what are you hearing as a reaction out in that community?
I think the community is just startled because it is a new number, and then there again it's in conjunction with some of the other larger construction projects in the area. Now, being in the construction industry myself is doable based on knowing what the object is. And now we have to start someplace. Before, there have been numbers brought in and you try to make the project fit the size of the numbers. Here, the projects have been clearly defined, not explained or specified, but we know what our objectives are, and we just applied rational numbers as far as what it would take for the construction based on the pupils.
Okay, Lauren, we only got about 30 seconds in this part of the show, but is this a good number, or is this a number that's going to just keep growing as we go along here?
Well, obviously anything is subject to inflation, and the longer that the program is delayed, the more potential there is for that. But right now, in today's dollars, this is a good number.
Okay, this is $1998.
Right.
So Dr. Adamowski's point that the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets.
Absolutely.
Okay, hold on, everybody. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll face the really tough issue. Where's all that money coming from? Welcome back. One thing is clear, it's going to take a lot of money to fix up the schools. Where is that going to come from? I posed that question to Dr. Adamowski.
The first chunk of resources that can jumpstart the plan is really dependent upon the funds that have been promised from both the county and the city of Cincinnati in return for the board's full rebate of the taxes on the stadium. Okay, so that would allow us to issue the first set of bonds and conceivably pursue the first third of the plan. The next 2/3 of the plan will depend upon some level of bonding, voter approval in terms of millage rate. I think we may want to present that to the voters as one whole plan. The other variable in all of this is the level of state support for facilities. We're in a state of Ohio which ranks 50th out of 50 states in the nation for age and condition of school buildings. And the reason many people feel that is because there is such a reliance in Ohio on localities to fix their schools. And these are big ticket items, and it's very difficult to do. We anticipate that the state share in facilities is going to be increasing over the next several years. Another reason for phasing is we'd like to take full advantage of that, even though it may not exist now. We'd like to take advantage of what might exist in the future.
Okay, well, I know that the funding thing and how to get things funded is always a tough thing, and as Dr. Adamowski just pointed out, the city and the county have to come through. The state's expected to come through. Who knows? You know, if all this happened, that would be a good kickstart, as he says. This is also going to take grassroots selling, and when it goes to the ballot for people. Did the committee deal with that, Judy? Is that part of your role?
It's not part of our official role, but obviously we have a major investment in this plan, and we're here voluntarily today to talk about it.
So you're going to be selling it. You know, one of the things is that, you know, one thing is to support the building of a lot of, renovating of buildings, building new buildings, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get a new building, and the history here has been a lack of maintenance. What's going to happen then, Tom?
Well, I think we've addressed the maintenance issue in referencing out of the CPS budget, looking for a fixed percentage of approximately 6%. But the key is also to being proactive in the current buildings that we have, and then that's why we're going with a standard model, because that eliminates some of your maintenance costs, because you can utilize or bulk buy some of the items that you consume and work from there. And there again, that hopefully demonstrates to the voters, when this comes to them, some of the efficiencies that they're building in and not on a spend method.
Okay. Lauren, one of the things that strikes me as I look through the plan, I mean, there's a number of buildings, I think it's 5 new buildings. Right. Some of those are always, they're put in there if land can be found type of thing. And one of them happens to be in the area that I live in town, College Hill Mount area. It's like, well, have you actually looked at where these would go? Have you got property cited for these things?
No. One of the next things that will have to be done by the district is a very detailed site analysis and site selection study. There are some areas in the community that we looked at that we know that there's some potential land available, or we know that there's some potential to possibly trade land with the city or the Recreation Commission or things like that. And then, of course, some of the existing sites will be reused. But that is definitely one of the next phases of study that has to be completed.
Okay, so that's still up in the air, which means some land cost
Absolutely.
could vary significantly here. You know, one of the things, no matter when you go through change, and this is pretty massive change, and this is change that people can see. I mean, buildings come up, they get renovated. That's stuff that people really understand. I mean, educational theory sometimes get lost on people. Judy, do you have any worry that just by making so much change, you stir up the district and you lose a lot of people? People say, I don't want my kids going someplace else. We're used to this, even though it's old.
But the district has been stirred up in the last couple of years. The district has made some changes with the adoption of the Students First plan, with the formulation of quadrants, has made some changes, and but those have been, well, the Students First is a total programmatic change, but the schools themselves have been, it seems, on a piece-by-piece basis, and what's really important about this plan is that the district was committed to forming a master plan for the whole district, and this is our recommendation to the board. Of course, it's the Board of Education that makes the ultimate decision.
But let me...
But it's important, we find it very positive that the board was interested in doing this kind of comprehensive planning, and that itself shows some kind of a commitment to stability, with the understanding that these changes will take place over a period of time.
My understanding is the board is going to make a decision fairly quickly here. Early December is their target. Is that correct?
That's their target.
Okay. Ty, on this question of big changes and people being upset, I think that's what we were hearing at some of these meetings this week. What do you say to somebody who school is going to be closed, torn down, their kids have been going there, maybe they went there? What do you say to people?
Well, there's two things. You want to be comforting because they are dedicated to the physical location of that building, but yet in turn you still want to sell them on the change in the building for the learning environment, but also try to sell them on the program is not the building. If you have a successful program, that can be placed with all of its components in another structure and then go from there.
You know, there's a lot of fear that I was hearing that people, all of a sudden kids were going to be bussed all over the place. As I read this plan, it sounds to me like it actually is even more neighborhood-based than what we got now.
And I think, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Lauren?
Well, as I said, when we went through the customer research, one of the significant themes that came out of that process was the idea that if everything was equal and my child could get a quality education in any building in the district, I would prefer that they were close to home. So what the whole plan is based on is this idea of bringing back the neighborhood school context. There's been much thought over the last several years that the neighborhood schools have not met the level of the magnet schools, and this is really designed to raise the level of the neighborhood schools. Not every child will be able to walk to school, but certainly reducing their time on buses is a significant interest and part of the plan.
Judy, one of the things I want to get in here, you and I are historians.
That's right.
Crazy people, hysterical people. There's going to be a lot of people, I'm sure, who are going to say, these are some wonderful stuff, wonderful architecture in a place like Fairview, wonderful details, Rookwood.
And I'm one of them.
And what do we say about that? A lot of these oldest buildings are going to go down.
Well, actually, not a lot of the oldest buildings, and this was an issue that we considered at great length, at greater length maybe than some other issues. I'm a member of the city's Historic Conservation Board. It's an important issue to me, and in many cases we looked at older buildings that were historically or architecturally significant and said, can we make this work? And most often we said, yes, we can. With renovation, we can make this work.
Okay. I've got only about 30 seconds left. On a question of priorities, are you going to start with the buildings that have to be removed and replaced first? And since a lot of those are in the older downtown area, is it going to start in one place and then spread out? What are the priorities?
Well, there is not a set implementation plan at this point, but the idea is that as we move into implementation, that it will be spread across the city so that no one particular area is getting all the impact at one time, and then it will go based on the greatest need. But there's a domino effect. You know, if you're moving students from one building to another, that building has to be ready in order to move them.
Well, thank you all. We're out of time. Thanks for being here, and we're going to hear a lot more about this in the next year or year and a half. Thank you. There are still 2 scheduled opportunities for you to have input into the facilities master plan recommendations. The first is a meeting this Tuesday night, November 10th, at Peoples Middle School in Hyde Park. The next night, Wednesday, November the 11th, there will be an open meeting at Chase School in Northside. Both meetings start at 7 o'clock.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next Sunday for an in-depth discussion with the men and women who are shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.